Hi, it's Grace. Welcome back to Emposia Book Club. So today we're going to be talking about Goodreads versus StoryGraph when it comes to recommending books, and I'm going to be putting to the test which of these reading tracking apps gives the best recommendations. And I'm pretty sure I've come up with a foolproof way to cheat the system and to work out definitively which of these apps knows me better. So make sure you stick around till the end of the video to see how I do that and what my final judgment is. So as you may know, Goodreads and StoryGraph are the two main, I would say, reading tracking apps. Goodreads has been around for ages, and then StoryGraph is a newer app and is kind of giving Goodreads a run for its money. So I used to use Goodreads from when I first started using it, kind of 2018, 2019 until the end of 2020. That's where I logged all of my reading, but in 2021 I decided to switch over to StoryGraph. I haven't fully yet taken advantage of the recommendations feature, and I still have my Goodreads account. I know that you can also get recommendations through there, so let's go and have a little look and see which one is better. I have my laptop here, so let's start off with Goodreads. Going into the browse feature, clicking recommendations, and there's a based on your to read shelf, which is a nice feature, and then other kind of recommendations based on my shelf. So you can see here like all the books I read on audio in 2019, my top 10 of 2019 shelf. So that's quite nice. It's set up in categories. I like that. Now let's switch to StoryGraph, see what the setup is there. So recommendations, explore, interesting. There's a list of books, which you can see here, and then a little thing that says, what are you in the mood for? You can be very specific in the way you filter your recommendations. So I'm in the mood for something adventurous, funny. You can choose whether it's fiction or non-fiction. You can choose a genre. So immediately I'm liking the setup of StoryGraph better. The idea that I could be like, I want to read a short, fast-paced crime book and then filter it like that, and getting just those specific books is actually, I think, a really brilliant feature that StoryGraph has over Goodreads. Let's just take it back a step. Let's just see what are the books that both of these apps are recommending me immediately and kind of see what I think of them on first glance. Okay, on Goodreads, I think I'm going to look at based on your top 10 2019 shelf. So immediately I can see The Godfather, not necessarily something I pick up. The Mermaid of the Black Conch is a book that I've been interested to read. Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, a super popular book. I'm not surprised that it's recommending it based on everyone on Goodreads, but for me, I don't read that kind of fantasy book, so not sure why that's on there. The Water Dancer, I am interested to read that. Olive Kitteridge by Elizabeth Strout, I do have on my physical TBR, but not on my Goodreads TBR, so again, that's pretty good. There's a lot of stuff that I would just have no interest in that I'm scrolling past. It does seem to be a real kind of mix of genres. So out of this 50 that Goodreads are giving me, 5 of those books are books that have been on my radar before and that Goodreads doesn't know, but I've already thought to myself I'd like to read. So 5 out of 50 is pretty good, but like I say, there's also a lot of genres on here that I just don't read from at all, so that's not great. Let's look at StoryGraph. So as you can see on StoryGraph, you get a little bit more information about each book. A lot of these books seem to be like literary or crime, which makes sense as that is the majority, if not all, of what I read. So clearly I think StoryGraph knows that about me more. So The Travellers by Regina Porter has been on my mental TBR. I have read some Tessa Hadley and I didn't really like her. A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing. I definitely want to read that. That's been on my mental TBR for ages. As has Tornado Weather. That's been a book that I really want to read. The Wife by Meg Wolitzer has been a book that I've been desperate to read for ages. So StoryGraph's only given me 30 there. Goodreads gave me 50 and that was on one shelf, but as I've said, you can also filter StoryGraph, and there was 4 out of the 30 books that I really wanted to read. All you maths geniuses will be able to see that in terms of just those numbers on that first look, StoryGraph is winning in terms of books that I've wanted to read anyway. But my little tip that I said I was going to say at the end, which I thought might be a good way of cheating the system, is that because I never migrated all my Goodreads data over to StoryGraph, it does mean that any book I've read this year, Goodreads doesn't know about, and any book I read before this year, StoryGraph doesn't know about. And so I thought it'd be fun to see if there's any books that I've already read that get recommended to me because they don't know I've already read them. So I did notice when we were looking on the Goodreads list that they had recommended me Consent by Vanessa Springora, which is a memoir that I read this year and therefore tracked on StoryGraph and gave 5 stars. So that's definitely a point to Goodreads. StoryGraph, out of those 30, didn't actually pull up any books that I'd read previously, although I have noticed before when using StoryGraph that it has recommended me books such as Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo, which I read in 2020 and loved. So we're giving the point to Goodreads on that, but I do think StoryGraph also has it in them. So in conclusion, I think I have to say that StoryGraph gives better recommendations for a couple of reasons. Just in terms of the kind of books it was recommending me, it definitely knew my genres a lot more. It was recommending me non-fiction, essays, literary fiction, and thriller, which is what I want to read. And so although Goodreads did recommend me some good stuff, it was in amongst what just felt like really popular books that everyone liked. Things that I don't really think are related to what I personally read, and it felt like it was just maybe a bit of a wider net that it was casting and a little bit less helpful to me. Also, as I mentioned, StoryGraph has a lot less information about me. I've only been using that app for 5 months, not even 5 months, compared to 2 years of Goodreads. And so that kind of, you know, gives Goodreads a head start that unfortunately I don't think even with that it kept up with StoryGraph. And then finally, I just think the way you can filter things on StoryGraph is so useful, especially if you're doing something like a readathon and you're trying to take a book off, or you're just in a very specific mood, like I want a memoir about, I don't know, religion, something really specific. I think that's such a handy tool, and so because of that, StoryGraph is the winner, for me at least. And if you're interested in switching over to StoryGraph, it's actually really simple to import your data. I'm going to do mine right now because I've been putting it off for too long, and we will link a little article on how to do it in the description below. But basically it's super easy. Just export a file from Goodreads, import it into StoryGraph, and then all of your books for however long you've had Goodreads will be in StoryGraph. I'm going to go do that now, but thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.